Judge, this is a value judgment debate from the perspective of the South Korean Ministry of Culture. As the government team, we believe that the adaptation of South Korean entertainment to appeal to global audiences is, on this, a positive change that is in line with the interest of the Ministry of Culture. But to start with, what exactly are the interests of the Ministry of Culture? First of all, it's to ensure the growth and stability of the Korean creative industry so that it can create jobs, bring in export money, and make Korea better respected globally. And second, to provide the Korean citizens with great cultural experiences and a sense of pride enriching their lives. Second of all, what does adaptation look like? First of all, it looks like a world where there are mixing styles to incorporate global trends, such as K-pop using Western hip-hop or EDM beats. Second, making content more accessible, such as K-pop songs written mostly in English, lyrics like BTS's Dynamite or Butter, or working with Netflix to provide high-quality subtitles and dubbing Korean movies and drama series. And third, global marketing, such as K-pop idols going on world tours or collaborations between Korean stars and global artists. However, we want to be very clear in this debate that this does not mean copying the West or losing Korean identity. K-pop still contains very distinct sounds and formats, and K-drama series still showcases Korean culture and values. Now, moving straight to our team's first argument on how adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. So while South Korean entertainment has enjoyed some global success, there are clear barriers that prevent it from being a part of the mainstream global culture without adaptation. So first of all, there's a clear language barrier as most people do not speak Korean, which means that while K-culture may have some fans that are willing to devote time and effort into overcoming the barrier, most people do not bother, and they prefer other content that they can easily understand and access. Second of all, the culture is unfamiliar, and most people prefer to stick to formats and styles that they already know and enjoy, which means that most people do not want to try Korean entertainment when it feels like alien to them. And we believe that these barriers mean that while K-culture may have some global popularity, it simply remains a subculture enjoyed by a small number of stands, as opposed to something that can be enjoyed by the much larger mainstream audience. As we believe that through adaptation to appeal to global audiences by using English lyrics or incorporating familiar pop beats, we remove these barriers. And we believe that K-culture no longer becomes limited to the subculture stance; it becomes part of the global mainstream with a much larger audiences. So, for example, while BTS had fans all over around the world, and their songs like "On" were massive hits, Western radio stations refused to play these songs because they were not in English. They, along with K-pop as a whole, were treated as a naked interest. And it was only when they started to release songs like Dynamite with a full English lyrics, and that they were able to break into the global mainstream and be exposed to a much wider audiences, becoming the first on global charts for the first time. So why is this important? So first of all, this brings huge economic benefits. So we believe that being mainstream means we aren't just selling to a small club of fans anymore. We're reaching billions of average listeners and viewers. And this leads to massive new profits for global commercials, huge streaming numbers on Netflix, and worldwide partnerships. And this brings billions of dollars back to Korea to support our economy. Second of all, this promotes Korean culture globally. So the opposition team may try to tell you that we are losing our culture, and while we accept that there is some trade-off of how much of our culture is contained in the content produced by the industry, the initial exposure of the culture is far more important. For instance, after Squid Game became a global hit, Korean learning on Duolingo jumped by a whooping 76%. So 1 out of every 13 tourists who visit Korea say that they came because of BTS. So we believe adapted K-culture becomes the gateway to deeper exposure to Korean culture. Third of all, the increased global attention and commercial success of the South Korean entertainment industry incentivizes more content creation and investment into the industry. So, for example, Netflix recently announced that they will invest $2.5 billion into making more Korean shows. This money creates thousands of jobs for Korean directors, actors, and artists, and also means more content for our citizens to enjoy. Finally, the global success of South Korean entertainment simply makes their citizens happy. Artists like BTS or Blackpink are seen as national heroes and make our people feel great pride in our country. So for these reasons, I'm more than proud to propose.
Most honorable adjudicators and fellow debaters, a culture is a type of proud identity to a country, but changing that to suit another country does not give any benefit to their own citizens. As the opposition house, we strongly oppose to the motion read. This house, as the South Korean Ministry of Culture, supports the adaptation of South Korea entertainment to appeal to global audiences. Very proud to oppose. Moving straight into the rebuttals of the previous speaker, the PM. The PM claim that South Korea will be a success because it comes over language barriers. However, when it's too focused on foreigners, citizens/residents won't be respected, and rather they might not know what language it might be, which is going to make much more confusion to their own city, giving much more harm. The PM
Yeah, hi,
also
ma'am.
claimed,
Oh,
yes.
It's protected time, no POIs.
Oh. The PM also claimed that it brings economic health to Korea. However, rather making citizens suffer from culture loss, economic improving becomes meaningless when they have much more harm. Therefore, the proposition's arguments does not stand in the real world. Now, since I'm done with my arguments, I'll give some rather explanation to the policy. First, as the PM illustrated how adaptation looks, more examples are changing Korean lyrics into an English lyric, Western pop structure, Netflix global formula, international casting/vibes, as an example. Now, moving on to our team's first two arguments, which are number one, global adaptation turns culture into a product instead of an identity. Number two, Korea becomes dependent on the external validation. Now, further explanation for the first argument. Culture focuses on history, emotion, social experience, and identity. However, when global adaptation pressure occurs, is it from South Korea isn't prioritized, but instead, what is it sold to a global audience becomes prioritized. Then companies will continuously urge Netflix friendly, TikTok friendly, Western pacing, English heavy style. In the end, local nuance decreases, styles Korean style culture is weakened, and generic global media society becomes rises. When culture is designed mainly to sell, authenticity becomes secondary to the people. The preposition might say culture naturally evolves. However, natural evolution is very different from marketing driven redesign. To add on more, we are not banning global trading, but opposing to the structure that the government is prioritizing global approval. Now, giving further explanation for the second argument. Very likely, people start to think if foreigners will like them, if rather than if Koreans will like them. As a result, the success line of Korean content will become external approval. As long-term harm, confidence of culture decreases. Korea stops exporting itself and starts editing itself. The proposition side might say, but global accessibility spreads Korea. However, people become interested in Korea because Korean culture felt different, not because it felt familiar. To conclude my speech, I want to emphasize that a culture becomes influential not when it changes itself for the world, but when the world becomes curious enough to understand it. Thus, as I told you in the middle flow of the first argument, we are not banning global trading, but opposing to the structure that the government is prioritizing global approval. As the LO, I gave two arguments of our team, some rebuttals for the previous speaker. For these reasons, we believe that the win clearly goes to the opposition side. Very proud to oppose.
so on adjudicator, the opposition world just creates a place that makes South Korea less diverse. On our world, we clearly create a world where citizens from different countries are introduced to Korean entertainment, such as K-pop or K-dramas. So three things you can expect from my speech today, Judge. First, support. Second, rebuttals. And finally, our last argument. So moving on to support first, our first argument was that adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. So there's obviously a clear language barrier because some people do not know how to speak Korean, yes? So while K-culture may have some fans that are willing to devote time and effort into overcoming that barrier, most people do not prefer other contents that they can easily understand and access. And also, why is this important, Judge? This brings very huge economic benefits to South Korea. Being mainstream doesn't only mean we're just selling to a small club of fans anymore. We are reaching billions of average listeners and viewers every day. So this leads to massive new profits to South Korea. Okay, and so second, this promotes Korean culture globally. The opposition can try to tell you that we are just losing our culture and like other countries might try to take our culture away. However, Judge, however, Judge, this isn't true because the content produced by the content produced by South Korea will not be taken away because it is just unique because it is South Korea. Other countries will not try to take it away and make it theirs. So this is not. So if the opposition tries to tell you that, that does not stand. So also moving on to the rebuttals now. So first they said that adaptation can hurt unique appeal. However, Judge, adaptation does not mean like just a bonding Korean culture. It means making it much more accessible to subtitles, collaborations, or universal themes. Many globally successful Korean works still maintain strong Korean identity while adapting presentation styles. And also, they just assume culture is just fragile. It is not. Korean entertainment became powerful precisely because it successfully blended Korean identity with global influences. So that argument does not stand. They also say that it will be less relatable for Korean citizens. However, Judge, domestic audiences are diverse too, especially younger generations already influenced by global culture. These younger generations are already influenced by our K-culture a lot. The ministry supports adaptation in addition to domestic content. It is not a replacement, Judge. So, and also, Korean youth already consumes globalized media like daily and every day. Opposition is just trying to exaggerate the idea that Korean citizens only want purely local content and only want like full-on Korean content, and that is like not true. So this argument does not stand. So, Judge, moving on to our team's final argument, it is going to be that adaptation can enable greater cultural innovation and diversity. So like the biggest threat to Korean entertainment right now is stagnation, correct? Making the same old things like over and over again and making it boring. If our music and movies like never change and evolve, there's nothing to keep audiences interested and engaged. This allows us this results in South Korea not making profit. And the Korean wave would just be like a passing fate that people just forget about in the future. And so why would K-culture stagnate without global adaptation? If creators only focus on the local domestic audience, they have no reason to take risks. They will just keep using the same old formulas because it's safe and proven to work on their target audience. There are also many stories you can tell using just one culture's ideas. Eventually you run out of new combinations. And before Korea started adapting to global styles, many local shows and songs were criticized for being cookie-cutter copies of each other. Almost every show was a romance drama with the same predictable twist. A super rich boss falls in love with like a poor worker, for example. Someone gets hit by a car, someone suddenly loses their memory, or someone gets a tragic sickness. K-pop was frequently criticized for being a robotic factory citizen. So this is crucial for the it ensures that the industry secures long-term survival, and it directly provides Korean citizens with more diverse, higher quality entertainment. Our world does that, and their world doesn't. So therefore, I am proud to propose. Thank you.
Hello, I'm the DLO of today's debate. I'd like to start with some rebuttals against the government team's speech. First, I would like to ask them a question. Why make a change when both global and civil audiences like the status quo? And why have K-dramas been so globally successful so far? Global audiences want a unique cultural experience, even if traditions are kept. If dramas became more familiar to global audiences, since they're already used to their culture and tired of it, it won't be that interesting. Making a risk to get more audiences when already so much people take trips to Korea affected from its beautiful culture. Being greedy can lead to the loss of global civil audiences and all. This risk is too big to deny, and when weighed from global audiences, the risk is much more significant. Well, look at BTS. It was famous at first, but see, only so much people came to BTS's concert, Arirang. Westerners are already used to and tired of their culture and English. Adding this adaptation in was such a great risk. We don't think that is such a good idea. Also, the Prime Minister mentioned language barriers, but most language barriers are already overcome due to various subtitles. Also, selling the copyright means they can just cookie cut it. The fact that it is South Korean doesn't mean anything to Western countries. And the previous speaker also talked about how young audiences are globally affected. Yes, they are, but global audiences, young audiences, are fully engaged in the present. No more adaptation is needed. Also, the repetition problem was a 19th century thing. No more of those someone you love dies and then you're like, oh no, bye-bye, or something like that. New ideas based on history is always popping up, and new classical hits are always coming. Finally, I'll move on to our last argument. Global adaptation will lead to the loss of intellectual property. Adaptation means Koreans become unfamiliar to their own culture. Various barriers.
Eli, ma'am.
Different. Yes.
However, the governments can still regulate partnerships to protect Korean creators while still expanding. What do you say about that point?
Sorry.
So the government can still regulate partnerships to protect Korean creators while still expanding their culture. What do you say about that point?
Well, Koreans, well, I mean, I didn't really understand that point, but in what I understand, Koreans, like you might say, will feel proud of how their culture is being successful, and that would mean more global civil audiences. Well, if is what you are saying, then well, various barriers like different languages and combinations of culture will confuse Koreans and make it hard to interpret. And Koreans don't care much about soft power as much as the government.
Judge, this debate was a value judgment debate from the perspective of the South Korean Ministry of Culture. As the government, we believe that the adaptation of South Korea would bring lots of benefits, which I will also elaborate later on in my speech. They said, Judge, the opposition said as if the world would be curious enough one day to without adaptation and Korean culture still getting enough attention. However, Judge, we believe that this is untrue and Judge, that's why there are adaptations. The world, for example, the foreigners do not have the reason to look at South Korean entertainment that are not even in their own language when there are already other fun enough languages, other entertainments in English. So we believe that this point does not stand. For this reason, I'm so proud to oppose. Also, Judge, the DLO had many irrelevant rebuttals, which I'll also mention later on. So now, moving on to our first clashes, which side is better for promoting K-culture? We said that adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. We said that while South Korean entertainment has had global success, there are some barriers preventing it from becoming the mainstream, like language barriers, unfamiliar culture for the foreigners, and more. And Judge, we believe that this is why South Korean culture still remains as a subculture enjoyed by a small number of stands as opposed to something that can be enjoyed by a much larger audience. We said that by using English lyrics or incorporating familiar pop beats, we can remove these barriers, letting it become the global mainstream. However, Judge, they rebutted by saying that when it's too focused on foreigners, citizens of Korea won't be related to it and won't be more confused. However, Judge, we believe that this rebuttal does not stand because there would still be lots of culture involved in it, and it's not that it will cause confusion, which lacked explanation. They also mentioned later on in their arguments that culture focuses on social identity, and they explained that they said that the priorities would change, leading to Korea's culture being weakened and authenticity becoming secondary. However, Judge, they have no mechanism behind this. And even if there was mechanism, Judge, it does not stand since citizens won't want purely local content too, which the DPM explained before. So we believe we won this clash. So now moving on to the second clashes. Which side supports greater cultural innovation and diversity? We said that adaptation enables greater cultural innovation and diversity. We emphasize that adaptation to a global audience gives us fresh influences and ideas that allows us to innovate and break out of this stagnation. It introduced new concepts and ideas that allowed us to create survival thriller shows like the Squid Game or K-pop songs that mix up with fresh sounds. However, Judge, they rebutted by saying that it does not stand since they have actual citizens that do not relate. However, Judge, at this point, it seems like they're just relying on this one fact, this one point that the citizens would not relate anymore. However, Judge, we believe that this does not stand for the reason I have explained and which I will also elaborate later on in my speech. Judge, they also mentioned in their arguments that people would start to make entertainment based on what foreigners like, not South Korean citizens, in which they do not like. However, Judge, the South Korean entertainment is based on what Koreans used to be based on what only Koreans like. For example, familiar movie plots that foreigners do not understand. And for Korean, and we believe that, and as we said before, Koreans are okay with not purely Korean content. And also, Judge, that's why this point does not stand. So we won this clash, we believe. They also had some statements about intellectual property of Korean content creators. However, Judge, as we said in our POI before, it can still regulate partnerships to protect Korean creators while still expanding. And Judge, we believe that the problem comes from bad contracts rather than the adaptation itself of Korea. So, however, Judge, they had no good response to our point, so we believe we won this debate. I'm so proud to propose.
Before I present our team's first clash, I would like to rebut to the government. The government first stated that we gained viewers from simplifying Korean songs to make it so Western countries could understand us. However, the most globally successful Korean content often remained mostly Korean. Like movies like Squid Game and Parasite succeeded because they had Korean, mostly Korean ways, not abandoning them. Social themes, they had Korean social themes rather than abandoning them. The government then said that adaptation increases accessibility. However, accessibility isn't the same as sustainability. People became interested in Korean entertainment because it was different from mainstream Western culture, not because it was similar. Now, moving on to our team's first clash, which is simplification versus uniqueness. The government said that by simplifying Korean culture so Western countries could understand, we got tons of fans and viewers. This is wrong. Korea, again, as we repeatedly said, got its famousness from uniqueness. People supported Korea. People from Western countries. Yes.
You mentioned before that Parasite and Squid Game and those movies became popular because they had South Korean culture in it, but didn't it also involve some adaptation? That's why it gained popularity from foreigners.
However, Squid Game and Parasite had Korean basically all it had Korean themes that rather other what you guys meant, what the government explained in their speech was adaptation is adapting the social themes and like so what was it? Western countries could it's kind of more the Westernish. However, Squid Game and Parasite had still had a Korean social theme, and it unlike other movies that adapted to Western countries, it had declined. I had Korean social themes rather than abandoning them. So, people supported Korean culture because of how Korean culture was different, not because of how it was familiar to their culture. Moving on to our team's second clash, which is global commercial versus identity. The government said that when we adapted to create accessibility and changed it so the Western countries can understand well, then we create an entertainment that all Western fans can support. However, when we didn't have any fans, we started gaining fans because of our Korean identity and our uniqueness. When we edit our culture to gain global commercial, we lose our social identity. We believe that our identity is more important than just gaining global commercial. We win every clash because we win every clash by demonstrating that the very foundation of Korean entertainment's global success, its uniqueness, is undermined by government's main approach. Uh, now, uh, uh, I'll summarize what I've said to you. I've presented you some rebuttals, two clashes, and why we have won the clash. Thank you for this. This is why we are happy to oppose.
Most honorable judge, the win clearly goes to the opposition side, the House which not only focused on foreigners but also respects their own South Korean citizens/residents. Moving straight into my speech. You can expect some notes and issues from the motions. This House asked the Korean Ministry of Culture supports the adaptation of South Korean entertainment to appeal to global audiences is read. First, on the issue of language barrier. The preposition said, oh, we can get over language barrier. Then a lot of people will get universal and then more people can be able to understand it. The opposition demonstrates how come you don't think about your own citizens. Said Korean people might not be able to understand it either, especially when they might have not learned about English or any other language. Therefore, the opposition clearly wins this issue. Second, on the issue of cultural confidence, the preposition side of myself say, well, when culture spread, Korea becomes well known. However, the opposition side demonstrates that it rather makes the external approval lead to decrease confidence of culture, which the LO already clearly reasoned. Therefore, the opposition proudly takes the second issue too. Now, some extra notes, we will go quite fast. The GovWhip already said to the GovWhip, the LO already gave the mechanism of how it will be secondary, thus the LO gave reasons. That means that you ignored what the LO said. The second note is that nobody will fund anymore on the government will have to sell the copyrights, which will result in the entertainment industry flop. Now, moving on to our team's strongest points. Our house's strongest point was global adaptation turns culture into a product instead of an identity. The PM reasoned that the priority is going to be switched. The important point is that Korea becomes dependent on external validation. This also blocks the reason and how citizens will be affected. Honorable Judge, there are more issues and notes we have to talk about. However, on the scale of urgency, incentives, and the opposition's arguments, the win of two issues, we're very proud to oppose. Therefore, we believe that the win clearly goes to the opposition side. Judge, if you want a South Korea that focuses on their own residents and foreigners, the opposition side takes the debate home clearly. Thank you.
Judge, isn't it clear that the government side should take this debate? Not only that they exaggerate the idea that Korea like citizens that only want purely local content adaptation does not automatically mean foreign ownership, and ownership depends on context. It may be place be state. Let me compare both worlds and identify which world is better. So proud to propose. Now, starting with our side of the world. So in our side of the world, adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. We believe that this is actually true. For this adaptation clears away barriers that prevent it from being part of the mainstream, like language barriers, etc. And second of all, our team stated the adaptation enables greater cultural innovation and diversity. We believe that this is also absolutely true. For adaptation to a global audience gives us fresh influences and ideas that allow us to innovate and break out of this stagnation. However, in the other side of the world, they try to not adapt South Korean entertainment to appeal to global audiences, but we like to point out that this was an absolute failure, right? Because we have four rebuttals and 4 points against this. First, they claim that adaptation is like the worst unique appeal, but we like to say that this is only an assumption that culture is fragile because it is not. Like Korean entertainment becomes powerful precisely because it successfully blended Korean identity with Korean identity with these influences. Second of all, they also claim that Korean citizens will not relate anymore, but we like to point out that Korean youth already consumes globalized media daily. And we believe that this opposition team exaggerates the idea that Korean citizens only want purely local content. Third of all, they also claim about the loss of ownership of intellectual properties, but we like to say 2 points. For one, adaptation does not automatically mean foreign ownership because ownership depends on context and regulation. Second, successful globalization actually increases Korea's bargaining power because Korean intellectual property becomes a more valuable intellectual. And before I end my reply speech today, I'd like to emphasize one thing, that we stated many relevant POIs against the opposing team, but we believe that these POIs were not explained properly, and therefore these are one of the main reasons why we should win this debate. Thank you.